This is the Made for Living Well podcast, hosted by Alexa Sherm, the place to create a life well lived.
Welcome back to the podcast. As always, my name's Alexa, and this is the place I believe you were made for living well. And I say that because I truly mean it. Health is not outside of us, it is in us. It's just learning how to live that out or how to create it. And that can happen in a million different ways. Now, all year long, we've been in a podcast series called Health School. And Health School was designed to teach you more about your body, because if I can help you understand it and how it's all interconnected, I think you can more easily understand how to support it and why we do the things that we do. Now, today on the podcast, we're going to talk about confidence, which is actually incredibly important to your biological processes, and I'm going to tell you why inside. But this goes along with last week's podcast when I told you 5 specific disciplines that I had added to my life that have really changed things. And I got some people who were a little shocked by those disciplines because they're not your average discipline. Like one of them was holy confidence, living with more holy confidence. And today I want to explain why confidence is a discipline, not an emotion. And the shift in understanding what confidence really is can significantly alter your life and, as mentioned, your biology. So today we're going to talk about confidence, more specifically, holy confidence, and how that should create your sense of self-confidence. But as a reminder, don't forget to go back and listen to the previous podcast where I talk more about my disciplines. And in the episode before that, give you a little rundown on what has been working well in my life and what hasn't. And let's just be honest across the board, because one of the things that you're going to learn about confidence is it's only the parts of you that you don't always like. It's okay not to be perfect 100% of the time. In fact, not being okay sometimes is just part of being human. And owning that can help you move through it. Not to enable you to stay there or to become complacent in those places, but to give you the confidence to continue moving forward even when life isn't going as you intended, or as you planned, or as you'd hoped. There are always going to be times in life when life is just hard, and that's okay. It's what you do through them that's going to either help you or hurt you. And one of the ways that we can use those times, the hard, the difficult, the overwhelming, in better ways, is to truly live within this sense of holy confidence. And honestly, I had planned this podcast long before it felt like the world was starting to fall apart with all the natural disasters that are happening and the overwhelm. I mean, it is honestly sometimes just hard to show up because I feel so terrible for what people are going through. We have gone through just a fraction of the natural disasters that other people have, and just those alone felt all-consuming. So I cannot imagine the sheer amount of grief and overwhelm and just frustration that people are living with. But I found that this podcast comes at the perfect time because it is one of those things, those foundations, those lifestyle principles that regardless of what is happening in life around you, we can still live grounded in the sense of holy confidence. So I hope that you find this podcast inspiring today and also give you a breath of fresh air of what confidence is not. Because I think we've long chased an idea of what confidence is that it actually isn't, and we're just left assuming that we just don't have the confidence. It's kind of this like mixed message. On one sense, confidence is assuming that we have what we need in order to accomplish whatever it is that we set out to do. Right? It's a sense of self-confidence of I can because I have. And while that's not necessarily wrong, like most health concepts in life, they're so close to the reality that we almost miss the lie within it. But it's the lie that keeps you stuck. We really have to expose the current definition or the current understanding of confidence in order to truly understand, but really, what is it? Where is the lie buried beneath that truth? Because here's the reality. At least I know in my own story, confidence cannot be something that we just muster up within us. Like on some level, is this belief in oneself and one's ability to handle life's challenges. And that's all great until you reach a moment in life where you're like, but I can't, and I didn't, and I failed, and it's not working. And then what are you left with, right? Like there's a point, and this is at least what I found in my own story, where I feel like I was trying to live more confident. People were telling me, like, if you would just live more confident, then things would be different. Then things would change. And I really believed it while also being incredibly hurt for whatever reason by those words. Some of the most hurtful words were those statements that were said to me by a number of different people in my life. And I think the problem with it is there's like this inner battle of like, you want to have the confidence, you assume you could just muster up that confidence. But when things don't work out in the intent, then you just go back to questioning, but what is wrong with me? I must be the problem. There must be something wrong inside of me. And therefore, it completely negates any sense of confidence you have. Like you're left with this vicious cycle of trying to do things in order to feel confident and assuming that if you feel confident that you'll be more capable of doing things. But when those things don't work out, you're kind of like, I don't know. I don't know why. I must be the problem. Something must be wrong with me. And confidence just kind of wanes, right? Like it just falls. It doesn't have any foundation in your life. And so you're just grasping for more. You're trying to learn more about yourself and more about what confidence means and more about how you can create it. And really the problem with this is it makes you rather self-absorbed. And not necessarily because you want to be. I know a lot of times we just think that we choose these things, like we choose self-inflation and self-absorption and even pride. And yes, these are all sins, but when we really understand it from the understanding of our biology, what you also have to know is that when your biology, when your sense of self becomes threatened, it actually expands. And this is wild. And I love the science of this. And honestly, the science of the human body and the way the mind works, I don't know how anyone could doubt God, like doubt that there was a creator who designed this all so perfectly. And also in a way to always lead us back to him. Like I think our biology shows our depravity and shows our need so greatly for something greater than us. Like we're all longing for more. We're all longing for that interconnection, and our bodies are longing to be connected to the source of life. And I seriously live so much in awe of this. So I briefly want to explain how our sense of self can quickly become inflated, especially when we feel bad about ourselves. So when it comes to survival, like all things, we will always protect ourselves. In immediate survival, we become more infatuated with ourselves. It's how we survived. It's why in survival mode, people become a little bit more isolated. They tend to become more independent. And we're even taught this. And on some level, yes, you have to care and protect yourself before you can help anyone else. That is the name of the game for survival. Now, when it comes to our sense of self, that is founded in our ego. Your ego is a God-created part of you that really, if we look at the Latin word or the root word for ego, it is I or self. It really is the home of your self-identity. And this is important, potentially one of the most foundational understandings of your biology, because if you can create a healthy sense of self-identity, you change what you perceive as safe or a threat. So really, this is the foundational component that is going to alter your entire biology based on every input that's coming into your body. Now, when you have an unhealthy sense of self or a sense of self that has no grounding, that has no safety, when you lack confidence, so to say, what happens is your ego starts to become inflated. Your sense of self is so important that when it feels threatened, it will start to become inflated. And the bigger it becomes, the more infatuated and absorbed you're going to be in yourself. Like literally, you start to create a world that centers around you. It really becomes almost a narcissistic idea, the sense of really self-pride. It's the sense of self-inflation that happens when your sense of self is really threatened, when you really don't have a solid identity. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times that has been masked in this artificial form of confidence. When people talk about themselves and they gloat about themselves and they're prideful about themselves, it can really come across as this sense of confidence. Like, wow, they really like themselves. They must be really confident in themselves. But we have to remember, just because it appears like something doesn't mean it actually is. And a lot of times, those people who are so self-absorbed really lack a foundation of safety that helps them to relax and really ultimately helps them to live life. Because life is not lived independently, but interdependently with all of life. We live our best lives when we stop focusing so much on ourselves. We are not living our best lives when we're isolated and self-absorbed and we have this inflated sense of self-worth. It's not to say that we shouldn't have a sense of self-worth, or we shouldn't have a sense of self, or we shouldn't be self-aware. Those are all really critical aspects of maintaining a healthy biological state and really living in awe and reverence of God. Because here's the thing, the more self-inflated we're going to be, the less we have the ability to look out and see around us, the less we have the ability to actually engage in a relationship with God. Really, the more inflated we make ourselves, the smaller we make God, and we make the world around us. Like, everything kind of becomes a threat. And that's why you start to engage in behaviors of like jealousy and comparison and overwhelm and pride. And a lot of these sins are just centered around this lack of self-identity, or a self-identity birthed in unhealthy things. Like, your sense of self is really, really critical to your biology because it's shifting, again, the perspective of everything you're taking in. And that perspective is changing your biology. And that's why I think it's so fascinating when we look at research and as it relates to confident people, we see a marked difference in a hormonal response. People who have more confidence, true confidence, not this self-inflated artificial sense of confidence, but true and lasting confidence, actually have a much better hormonal flow. In fact, there's a really large research study that was done on men, and they found that men who were more confident in themselves, in the workplace, in life, in their marriages and relationships, they actually had a healthier or an increase in testosterone and a drop in cortisol, which, if we look across the board historically today, we are sitting at the lowest level of testosterone in men ever recorded in history, and it is a really big problem that we are existing within. Testosterone rates are plummeting, especially in men. But we're also seeing that in women as well, that when we throw off one key hormone, especially when we get into sex hormones, because we raise our cortisol or our stress response, our entire biology is going to shift accordingly, and it's not going to be in a positive way. So they're doing lots of research that shows that how we present in life and where our foundation is, again, going back to the spiritual need, that is going to change our biology potentially more than anything else, because your ego, your sense of self, is really changing your perspective of all of life. And that changes your reaction to life. Like, what someone might perceive as healthy, as safe, if you perceive it as unsafe, you're going to do something completely different with it. And it could alter your biology for days, weeks, even months to come. Our perception matters because that is literally the filter that determines the outcomes of your hormones and what gets sent through your body and how you feel and the reactions that your cells take. It is affecting everything. So confidence research is super fascinating to me. Again, more confidence relates to better health. So the question is, how do we actually become more confident? Well, it's really ironic because I think a lot of belief about confidence is that you have this high sense of self, that you are able and capable. Again, all of those notions that you can, like you can do this. And that's not necessarily wrong, but true confidence is actually the opposite of look at me and all the things I've done. It's actually owning the parts of you that you don't always like. It is literally the exact opposite of what most people think confidence is. It's being okay. I don't want to say being okay, but it's acknowledging your depravity. In a lot of ways, it's like saying like, I don't like these parts of me. I failed here. I have a lot of shortcomings. This is my sin. It's like being vulnerable to lay it on the table and to recognize that I can't do this alone. Here are the parts of me that I am weakest, not to stay there, but to recognize that your need is greater. Like you alone are not that great. Your greatness comes from your connection, again, to that spiritual need, to a God, to his path, his plan, his future for you, but also your interconnection with all of life. And I know that people could take this really poorly, especially if you already feel like you're not enough or you're consumed with your problems, which just naturally leads to more self-absorption. This could be another thing to be like, oh, I am a mess. I am a mess. Here's the reality. We all are. Humans are a mess. Confidence comes in from acknowledging I am a mess. I don't have this all figured out. I'm not that great. I sin a lot. That doesn't mean I want to keep doing that, but I'm going to plant myself in something that is greater than me. I am going to recognize that my greatest aspect, the best way of living, is actually to get outside of myself. Not to neglect myself or abandon myself or to suppress my needs, but to recognize that the only reason that I can is because God is. The only way I am is because he helps me. He guides me because of this interconnection. What I'm trying to say is the power of confidence is recognizing and admitting your shortcomings, because it's in that then that you can grow and that you can become better and that you can really just live more life. You can start to see outside of yourself. And I say this because if you look on the opposite end of this, like if you're trying to achieve confidence by reaching a place of what would be considered maybe more perfection or like this arrival or this inflated sense of self, in a lot of ways, you're always then going to try to be covering and suppressing and maybe even ignoring the shortcomings that you have. Because humans have shortcomings. Like, I mean, failure exists, right? Like the greatest athletes in the world failed endless times to get there. The greatest businesses in the world failed endless times, went through really hard things in order to grow to become that. I love what even like happiness research says, like the happiest people are not the ones who have been void of unhappiness. They're the ones who have most experienced the unhappiness, understood it, and then lived through it. Like it's understanding that in the hard, there's so much room for growth and understanding, and there is so much space to build the confidence in those places. Again, I don't say that to enable you to continuously stir around your problems or try to suppress them, but to really give you the freedom to say, like, you don't have to be perfect and you don't have to put on a face of perfection in order to live your best life. Your best life is really the surrender of like, I am not capable on my own, but I'm going to surrender to the one who is. It's really building your sense of self through the idea of confidence. Your sense of identity comes because you are confident. Like you don't build your confidence from your sense of self, but your confidence in something bigger than you creates that sense of self-identity that helps reduce the inflation of yourself and exist within this healthy, balanced state where you can actually get outside of yourself to see the bigger picture of life, to engage with life, which is really hard to do if you've ever spent any amount of time just so concerned and consumed with yourself. And here's the thing, we all have. We have all been there. Like, I'm just going to come out and say it for all of us so you don't have to like go through this process of like, I don't necessarily want to admit that I've been prideful and self-inflated and self-consumed. That's part of being human, right? At any point when we've been threatened through life, which has happened to all of us, on some level, we've all become self-inflated and self-righteous through those moments. It's not comfortable in a world who demands perfection to recognize and lay down our weaknesses. It doesn't feel safe all the time or necessarily comfortable to just expose the parts of you that aren't your best parts, right? Like it's not there. But being willing to go to those uncomfortable places to say, I might not be good at this, or this might be a problem in my life, to say that, you take away so much power for those patterns to continue. And you really start to get your power back because you, again, have surrendered to something bigger than you. Like that ultimately is our power. And I think that helps us to live more fully in the design that we were given. Because we were not put here on this earth to live isolated, independent lives. The world may convince you that that's what we should be doing, but the reality is the best life are those who are interconnected. And if we want to dig back into research, there is tons of relational research studies done that show that relationships, love, being connected with other people, even just a 20-second hug with someone else can change your biology more than anything you eat, more than any exercise pattern that you have, more than any medication. Connection, love, interconnection, dependency, these are all really powerful tools that we have that drastically change our health. And I think we discount them because we think that we have to keep doing. Like we discount them in a means to continue micromanaging. What we've been led to believe is that only because we can't see the other side to see the reality that confidence and health does not come from having a higher sense of yourself. It's not saying that you can't have a high sense of self. You should have a great self-worth. But that's because of the one who created you, not necessarily because of what you've created. Like our existence in this life is not that we would become bigger, but that God would. And here's the thing. I don't always think that in the Christian space, we do a great job of explaining how important your sense of self is. A lot of times you just hear die to yourself, which without really understanding that you have to have a solid foundation of understanding of sense of self, just hearing die to self will really just make you more self-inflated, for a lack of better words. It's not intentional, but again, I think that there's like so much understanding that can be happening within the understanding of God when we recognize how He designed us and how He built us. And really then how we can use that as a tool to better live our lives. And it's not necessarily to make ourselves smaller, but to expand ourselves, because when we expand, we also expand our view of God. But the expansion is different than self-inflation. And I'm trying to think of like how I can best identify this. And I don't know if this is going to help or not, but the best that I could come up with is, I think when we look at making ourselves smaller, that's like us stepping inside of a house and we have this limit, right? Like we have this ceiling on us that says like, you cannot get bigger than this. This is the max point that you can grow before you discount God. And I think what happens is like, yeah, you might be able to build a bigger house and it will have more windows and you can see God more fully. But I think we still really limit the view of God by staying inside that box of keeping ourselves small. What happens when we step outside of that box, outside of our sense of self? We expand all of it, right? Like we expand our entire view of life, of our bodies, of us. But within that happens because we have expanded our view of God. Like we can see bigger things, right? Like we can see all around us and we recognize that God is so big, right? So big. It's not just this little bit of light that's coming in through a little tiny window. It's when you step outside the house, when you step outside yourself, you really see, wow, like God is a big God. When you recognize how big He is, you can more easily surrender to that you're a piece of a larger story, that your job is not to inflate yourself, but to live interconnected with all of life. When we really come to this place of understanding that, like you can live in the confidence and create that foundation, like knowing 1 Peter 2:9, like we are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. And that doesn't mean that we should think more highly of ourselves than we need to, but just to live confident in that. I mean, when we really lay out those words, like a chosen people, a royal priesthood, like those are really big, powerful, foundational words that honestly, like, I don't know why you would want to inflate yourself anything greater than that. Like, we can't become greater than that. Like, that is our purpose, and it's because of him. But again, going back to like Romans 1:3, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with faith God has distributed to each of you. Again, it's not saying that we should think little of ourselves either. But I think it's really saying is surrender your sense of self. Like, our job is not to bring goodness to God, but it's God who brings it to us. Like, it's not what we can do for him, it's what he has done for us. We are a part of a larger story. And really, that becomes our sense of confidence. That becomes the holy confidence that we should live within. And it's that daily reminder. Or for me, it has become a discipline that really guides my life. That says, like, I do not need to work to inflate myself, but I can step outside myself and really live more present focus. And that comes back to, again, that I am not alone, but I'm part of a larger story and a deeper relationship. It really takes the selfishness out of the picture and helps me to live more selfless. Not in a way that diminishes myself, but just in the simple fact that I don't need to. Like, I find a greater purpose in living outside of myself. I see the greater good. Life is better lived when you're not so consumed with yourself, but you can consume yourself with all of the things that God has given. But holy confidence doesn't just happen. It is a discipline. For me, that takes a daily reminder. It takes really filling myself with God's word, reminding myself of who he is and what he's done, what he's capable of doing, and really what he's called me to do. It is the daily putting of trust in something larger than myself and reminding myself I might not be able to, but in him I can. It's the daily reminder of I am weak, but he is strong. I know this is really elementary, but it is so foundational. Because when you create and establish a holy confidence, you completely alter the perspective. You go from fearing things and being overwhelmed with things to being able to rest, to being able to have that type of peace that God says surpasses all understanding. And I'm not saying it's perfect. I have a long ways to go. Again, this is why this is a discipline, because I recognize that this is not necessarily something that is just going to stay. It's not necessarily something that is not going to take work. It's something that I have to continuously remind myself of and go back to. It reminds me to run back to the truth, knowing that when I establish myself with a sense of holy confidence, I have a better sense of self, not because of who I am, but because of the confidence in who God is. And that is so different. Now, I love this quote by John Piper, and I think it so clearly states the best way to live. And he says, I am not on a mission to help you feel great about yourself. I am on a mission to help you feel so good about the greatness of God that you forget about yourself and live a life of love, making others glad in God. The reality is honestly, Christians should have a positive view of themselves in Christ. And I don't say that in a self-help, cheaply affirming self-worth. I say that from the foundation that the born-again Christian should have the most concrete, positive, confident self-image on the planet. Not because we're sinless or perfect, but because we don't have to be because of God. Now, I know that I have not always exuded that sense of self-confidence, but I think the more life I've experienced and the more I've recognized and the more I've aged, that all the things I thought were confident were just fleeting things. They were things that came and went, things that I couldn't hold on to, things that took so much energy and time and exhausted me, things that really, in the end, only left me feeling worse about myself, which only made me cling to new ideas and new tricks of self-help and really trying to understand myself. When I found myself was really when I came to the end of myself to say, like, I don't know. Like, I am who I am, and I'm not perfect. And I have so many shortcomings and weaknesses. And you could probably point out a million flaws inside this podcast. I know that. But I also know that I can still keep moving forward in my imperfection because I have a holy confidence. And all I can say is I can rest in that. You can rest in that. And really, having that sense of confidence truly changes who you are from the inside out. It's not an artificial, performance-based, external shell of you. It is born on the inside of you, and it will exude outside of you. It will become a light that other people notice. And that is truly what confidence is. So let us not be mistaken by all the artificial ways that we should build confidence. It is not something that you have to strive or chase. And it is definitely not getting to a place where you can perfect life. That life doesn't exist, at least not long term. But it's really surrendering to the parts of you that you don't always like, even the parts of your story that you hate. It's not necessarily trying to abandon those or trying to write a new story. And it's also not saying that you have to continue in that story. But holy confidence comes in to say is like, I have been here, I have done these things, hard things have happened, but this is what I'm going to do through them because I have a greater God who I believe in and I can rest in that. But getting there takes understanding who God is and why he made you and what is your intent. And when you get into the study of why God made you, it was not for yourself, but to worship him, to be a light to him. And I think it's really fascinating when we get into all of the ways that we worship God and we really understand those are some of our best tools of healing. Like certain frequencies of music, humming, those are wildly powerful in regulating your nervous system. Just as gratitude, forgiveness, prayer, meditation, awe, wonder, this is what we were designed for. And if we would exist within our design, we would heal far beyond what we ever dreamed possible. Not to mention, I think that there's a lot of hurt that's happening with the self-absorbed state that we often live in. Like we don't recognize how much grief and damage is done when we are so consumed with ourselves. Like we become masters of our own misery. We are hurting ourselves because of our self-absorption that is happening out of our lack of confidence. And I think the end of the quote that I started from John Piper ends this so well. And this is what I want to leave you with.
I'm not on a mission to help you feel good about yourselves. I am on a mission to help you feel so good about the greatness of God that you forget about yourselves. And live a life of love, making others glad in God. I'm going to say that again because in our 21st century mold and time on the back end of the crest of the wave of self-esteem, it needs to still be said. I am not here to make you feel good about yourself. That's a low salvation. That's a low-level American gospel message. I am here to make you so happy in God, to help you feel so good about the glory and majesty and beauty and justice and love and truth and power of God that in that you forget about yourself.
He goes on and says, some of you have heard me say nobody goes to the Grand Canyon to increase his self-esteem. Because on the edge of the Grand Canyon, as you feel your soul being drawn out into the vast opening, that's not what happens. What happens is wonder and awe, which is what you were made for. Heaven will not be a hall of mirrors in which you like what you see. In fact, I just have this suspicion that there won't be any mirrors in heaven because anything good and beautiful about you will be radiated back to you from the other people that you're loving so much. It just bounces back to you. But mainly, it's going to be about Jesus everywhere, satisfying your soul. So thoughts about you in this world cause us so much grief. We think that the solution is if I could just feel better about me. better about the way I look, better about my height, my weight, my complexion, my hair, my mathematical ability. If I could just feel better about me, I'd be healed. You won't. You wouldn't be healed. You'd have low-level, low-grade, non-satisfying measures of contentment. You were made to see God, love God, delight in God, and be stunned by God. So I'm not here to help you feel good about yourself. I'm here to help you feel good about God and forget about yourself. Give your life away in love to others. That is the greatest sense of confidence. Friends, that is what I leave you with, and I hope that this helped. I hope you recognize that confidence is so close to the reality that you could almost miss it. But really, it's a surrender to what you're not and what God is. It is a holy confidence that you are looking for, and that has the ability to heal on such a deeper level, not to mention help you get out and live your God-given purpose. You were made for living well. It is inside of you, and it partially comes from your sense of holy confidence. Okay, I hope that you can be encouraged by that and you can live that out this week. Next week, I thought this was a good foundation for next week as we start talking about bad diet advice. We've got to go there, and understanding how to shift your reality of bad diet advice into the truth is going to take a holy confidence. Don't forget to head to the show notes where you can learn more and we dive more into the practical steps of living in the holy confidence over at thelivingwell.com. Also, I would love if you shared this with your friends and family. It means the world to me. It is how the show grows and other people find it that wouldn't otherwise see it. You could also leave a rating and review. All you have to do is go to thelivingwell.com/review to leave a rating and review, or do it wherever you listen to the show. Okay, that is it, and I will see you back here in the next podcast.